Sure. Good. Yep. Okay, it's 2 o'clock, members, so I'll just make a start of the meeting. So, good afternoon and welcome to this monthly location meeting of the Culture, Connection and Place Scrutiny Committee on 2 p.m. Friday the 14th of November 2025. I'm Councillor Sean Pierce, I'll be chairing the meeting today. As usual, please make sure your phones are switched to silent during the meeting. I'm going to double check mine now. And for those joining on Teams, if you could make sure your microphones are muted unless you're called to speak, please. If you do wish to speak on Teams, please raise your electronic hand, and in the room, please raise your hand. I'll just people online, if you could keep your cameras on, if you're contributing to the meeting today, please. And in terms of people in the room, we've only got a handful of people. So I've got Councillor Bob Wilford to one side of me, and then we've got James Davis and Brendan Griffiths in here as well, in the room with us today, along with Tom, the Temp Services Officer. So I'll now move on to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations to make?
I see no indications, Chair.
Okay, thank you. As usual, if you feel you need to make a declaration during an item, please just pop your hand up and we can deal with it then. So I'll move us on now to part 1 and item 3A, which is the bus franchising base network endorsement on pages 3 to 46 of our agenda pack. Before we go to questions, I just want to hand over to officers to perhaps do some introduction to the report. I don't know who wants to start.
Yeah,
you can start, James.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, so just give you a brief summary of the report, obviously before questions. So between July and September this year, public engagement exercise was undertaken by TFW and local authorities to seek feedback on the proposed base network. That feedback has been considered and an updated base network is now being proposed. Officers are seeking endorsement to recommend the updated proposed base network in Neath Talbot to the South West Wales Joint Committee and subsequently to Welsh Ministers for inclusion in the Welsh Bus Network Plan. This is what franchising in South West Wales will be based on going forward. We're also recommending a delegated authority be granted to enable officers to continue working in partnership with TFW on the base network in Neath Talbot to allow for more detailed timetable and service connection details to be accommodated, which may bring about minor changes to the network. Officers are recommending that any minor changes will be made in consultation with the cabinet member and local ward members that would be impacted. It's important to note the network has been designed by TFW as a cost-neutral network, assuming that all funding that currently supports bus services in the region is maintained. Should the level of funding available change, then the level of bus service within the base network would change respectively. The same would apply as well for operating costs. So if costs were to increase, then the level of service would likely decrease. There's one thing within the report which it makes clear in terms of our position as an authority at present is that so if costs do increase, then the council cannot be expected to meet the shortfall in those costs. Is there anything further to add? Maybe not. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to questions then, and I'll start with Councillor Bob Wilford.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, James and Brendan. It's actually on the subject of the funding that I have my questions when reading through. It is used as assumed that funding will currently support bus services in the region is maintained. Do we have anything large on that? Do we know that funding is going to be maintained? Have we had any kind of insight into what other funding may be there?
If I start, yeah. So I think it's important to know, I think funding for local bus has been stable for a long period of time. So that's the assumptions coming from TFW that nothing changes. There's been some minor changes, but nothing significant of impact. So the reason why we've included as well that sort of last point, which I sort of touched upon in the introduction, is that the funding that's in the system at the moment isn't expected to change. Now, if we go through this whole process of sort of franchising, the change of the model in terms of they can be running in terms of ghost contract instead of a net contract with the bus suppliers, then if there are changes to the costs, it's not been made clear to us anyway as officers at the moment if those increase, where they're going to be picked up from, and we can't be expected to pick those costs up, obviously with our budget situation that we're facing.
Okay, so is that the fact we can't, is that in writing? Is that part of an agreement, or is it just we expect them to say, you know, our executives say, no, we can't take any more costs?
We've included within this report, I suppose it's a bit of a caveat, because whilst TFW are working towards, and the whole model of franchising obviously is to, you know, the one ticket element associated with the West Transfer strategy, and we probably understand and support that. I think there's probably some nervousness associated with the process in terms of what is it going to actually cost going forward.
Yeah.
Although there's no substantial changes to the base network, there are some improvements in certain areas. We'll see some minor improvements. There's nothing significant. But as we know, Brendan far more than what I do, when you actually go out the tender for these new contracts, quite often they're coming back more expensive each year. So it's just the reason we've included it in this report is just to say, actually, we've got a contribution that we make already, which I think is so just over 300,000. It would be difficult for us as a council to then subsidise any shortfall in funding or to address any increased operational costs as part of the process, which then TFW and Welsh Government will be responsible to deal with, as opposed to us as local authorities.
Okay. I had a second part of the question.
Yeah, go
on to that. Is that okay? Yeah. Again, on page 14, you've got the current funding envelope includes, and it says existing local authority revenue support contributions, local bus services, and existing local authority contributions to concession fares. Could we have those figures in the report or not, or are they not static enough? It was just so that we can see exactly what we are contributing and what concessions we do contribute towards.
Do you want to run through those figures?
Yeah, we can run through figures for you. So at the moment we use our own RSG, which is unhypothecated. It's to 320,000 to support bus network itself. So everything else then is through is funded by the Welsh Government. So with the bus services support grant, we get 392,000 from them. Now, BSSG does change on an annual basis, unfortunately, it goes up and down. And then there is what's known as the BNG, which is the Welsh Government Bus Network Grant. Now, we received 2.7 million from that. So the total funding to subsidise the buses themselves is 3.4 million. Now, on top of that then, is concession fares element. Now, concession fares isn't a grant, say so. It's to reimburse the bus operators for carrying passengers for free. So instead of them receiving revenue, we have to support them by paying the revenue costs to them. So at the moment, we contribute as a local authority 718,000 to concession fares reimbursement. Of that 718,000, we receive hypothecated through the RSG 365,000. So that's an extra 353,000 that we supply from our revenue grant.
Okay.
In Neath, Talbot, and Welsh Government contributed last year 1.8 million towards concession fares. So we contributed 718. Welsh Government paid 1.8 million. £1.5 million spent on concession fares. So that's the type of values we're looking at, really.
Okay.
And if it's
Quite substantial, really.
It's a lot, yes.
yeah, we can survey that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. Any other questions from
No,
you?
that's fine. Thank you. So, yeah, good.
So, I'm going to go to Councillor Dacey next on Teams.
My internet's not great, Sean, so if I freeze in or whatever, it's not great for the weather. It's affecting it. But on the alternative options on page 12, it says if we do not endorse the updated base network, it will still progress as planned by TFW and the CGC, and it will recommend to I would decide to recommend the updated base network to the Welsh ministers anyway. So is there any point in this scrutiny?
Thanks, Dr. Dacey. If I start, and then maybe we can come in and explain, I suppose, the benefits of South West going first. Because So obviously with bus franchising, Councillor, the responsibility is moving from us as a local authority to Welsh Government, Welsh ministers, obviously then delivered through TFW. So TFW with a lead on bus franchising and the work being done. Obviously, they report to the CJC, and they'll be reporting to the CJC for this hopefully to be put forward and endorsed then to Welsh ministers who will make the final decision. Now, because of the reason, the laws change, and it's going to be Welsh Government who is responsible for delivering local bus. So the reports are being brought before each individual council in the CJC, because obviously South West Wales are going first. And what we are having at present is a significant involvement in the design of the base network. But fundamentally, going forward in other regions, that wouldn't necessarily need to be the case. But at present, it is. So there is a benefit with us going first and the involvement we're having. Brendan and the team are doing an excellent job, and they are pushing obviously to support our residents as best they can in terms of this base network, and taking into consideration the feedback received with the public engagement exercise as well. I take your point, and yet, as a matter of fact, the CJC could actually still put it forward if, for example, Swansea, Pembrokeshire and Carmarthen are all happy with the base network, and Neath Talbot actually said no, we're not going to endorse it. Fundamentally, voted, and they will still go to Welsh ministers with an endorsement from the CJC.
Yeah, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, Cam Brendan,
Yeah. So yeah, you are quite right, Councillor Dacey. You know, at the end of the day, we are bringing this through the governance process at the moment. So we have to bring the local base network to our cabinet and yourselves with regards to the network in Neath Talbot. The CJC will be looking at the wider regional base network. But ultimately, this will be a Welsh Government bus network, which will principally be designed and agreed by Welsh ministers from 2026. So we are in a position where we can come to yourselves and let you know what's happening, etc. Again, there will be partnership work in there after the 2026. But ultimately, what we're doing is we are bringing our base local network to yourselves, which will form part of an all Wales network plan. And that's what needs to be agreed by 2026 for the bill to be passed. So basically, members are having sight quite early, and we've had a number of workshops as well to have an insight of what's happening in Neath Talbot. But it's a small part following the governance, and it's a small part of the all Wales bus network, which Welsh ministers will decide upon in 2026.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. Do you have anything to come back with, Andrew?
No, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
No, that's okay. Thanks for the clarification there. I mean, it is a little bit convoluted, isn't it? And it is challenging us being the first region to do it. I think everyone's kind of learning as they go as well about how best to go through this process. I got an indication from Councillor Gareth Rice. Over to you, Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Some of the points have already been touched on. But whilst I appreciate the proposed network has already undergone, excuse me, the 12-week period of public consultation, and as we know, the base network routes themselves have now been established and published. Are they set in stone, or will there be flexibility going forward to make any amendments to any unforeseen issues or improvements to include adjustments to routes, whether it be additional stops or less stops, the frequency of services and ticket pricing, and that's before it's actually set up and made operational, and then probably more difficult after the franchise has been given out. But then if we then see teething problems and find that actually this route could benefit from going an extra 2 or 3 stops, is there any flexibility further down the line to achieve that, or is it now this is it and this is how it's going to run? Thank you.
Okay, Thanks, Scott.
Do the same again if I start, and
Yeah.
Ben gives all the detail.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yes is the answer. I think the simple answer, because there's already been changes, very minor changes made since we prepared this report. In terms of some of the detail you were talking about there, Councillor Rice, that hasn't even been considered yet in terms of connection details, in terms of the start time in the morning, the end time in the evening. The only thing this has been designed on to date is actually where the buses go, and how many, how often the trips are going to be run. So there's a lot of detail that needs to be talked about, and obviously once they go through that process, it's going to impact what's already been done to date. Don't anticipate it to be major impacts, but there will be some impacts. But I'm sure Brent can obviously explain that process better than I can, and give you some more information on that.
Yeah, just a little bit extra then, that's all. Yeah, there will be tweaks over the next year. So the process of procuring the franchise will start spring 26. So there'll be tweaks made up until spring 26, no doubt. Then once the procurement aspect is advertised, the franchise network isn't due to start until September 27. So no doubt, once the operators see that procurement documentation, they might have some input into that as well. Although TFW are engaging with operators starting next week, actually, for over the next 2 months. So hopefully they will iron out any amendments that maybe operators might wish to include. But again, for the bus bill to pass through in 2026, that's all they need to consult on at the moment is the base bus network, which is basically the routes on the map, like the start times in the day, the operational times during the day, the connection times, etc., and timetables isn't part of that consultation, and that will be decided probably in time for the procurement exercise in spring 26.
Yeah, thank
Do you
you.
want to come back, Anne?
Yes, please. Just saying, yeah, thank you. There's a few amendments I'd like to see. But again, especially with frequency, I'm sure we've all had these discussions ourselves about extra weekend, extra evening, especially back for the hospital in particular. But I'd like to, after the franchises have been granted, it would still be nice to see the flexibility within that to make tweaks for any issues that we haven't yet seen. But as you know, it's like once a franchise has been given, they say, "Oh no, that's the franchise I've got. I'm not going to amend any routes or amend any times after that." So it's just been nice to have that reassurance if the flexibility was put in with the franchise that it can be changed at a later date. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
Yeah, so basically within the franchising model, obviously TFW are designing this base network and the network plan to mirror the existing funding available, as we've already mentioned. Frequencies are also a part of the base network design. However, if we want to improve on the network, for example, Sunday services, like you mentioned, they have prepared an aspirational network, which is what we took to workshops a year, 2 years ago. Now, those aspirational networks, they're mothballed, let's put it that way then. So let's say, for example, there is funding available, there may be opportunities to enhance the network going forward. So the aspirational networks haven't been binned, they're still there, they're in the background, and I would have thought that they would be able to build that into the procurement exercise going forward as well, depending on funding.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. Gareth, is that okay?
Yeah, it's reassuring. Thank you, Chair.
I think that's the key point, amongst this, in terms of what everybody would like to see in terms of the aspirational network and the base network. They're two different things, and that's going to be down to funding. So obviously we're here today to present the base network, your sort of worst case, depending on obviously how the bus will be funded going forward. and what that level of funding will look like will then depend on what, like I said, the things we're talking about, those service connections, frequencies could change, the start and end time of the day could change. But we're not at that level of detail yet. No.
Yeah. Okay. Do any other members have any questions on this item before I ask a few? Can't see any indications at the moment. So, I mean, I've had a lot of discussions with Brendan around bus and in CJC as well, actually. So, I mean, there's a couple of things that sort of kind of stand out for me in terms of, and it's mainly the uncertainty, to be honest, around how some of these arrangements are going to work. And I think, you know, I perhaps feel a little uncomfortable around the sort of the idea that we're endorsing this, in the sense of there's so much we don't know about it yet, but I suppose this is kind of a technical exercise, isn't it? Because it's necessary for the bill.
Yeah.
And I think seeing it through that lens, I get it. But obviously from a point of view as a local member, not knowing whether this network is going to mean that somebody can get to work in the morning, it's hard to sort of say I'm happy with it in that sense. And I think, you know, any endorsement needs to be caveated with that, really, in that sense, because I think broadly from my point of view, the routes themselves I'm relatively comfortable with. But without the level of detail of what does an evening service mean and what does a morning service mean, particularly on a long route, it might start at 6 o'clock one end of the route, but what time is it picking somebody up further down? That's a bit challenging, and I think, you know, the sooner we can understand how that level of detail is going to be generated between now and spring 26, I think the better, because there's going to be trade-offs there, no doubt, and there'll need to be a bit of input around what those trade-offs should be. And you know, that's just again an offer really for us to have some input on that, if we can, when those discussions do happen. I mean, the other thing that I'm really confused about, really, and I don't think officers can provide any clarity on this, but it's how does this funding model work? You know, once this is done and we're up and running, you know, at the moment, Welsh Government are giving us money and we are paying operators. Now, that's not going to happen in the same way. If they're assuming the funding level stays the same, some of those grants, I will assume, are going to be passed through to the CJC if the CJC is going to take responsibility for the network. Or maybe Welsh Government is doing it directly, I'm not sure. But I for the amount of money we're putting in, and we had the discussion earlier about what we're currently putting in, obviously that needs to be agreed somewhere, doesn't it? That money is still going to be put in by local authorities. And if we decide to put in less money or cut something, or Swansea decide to cut something, and we've got a regional network, this funding isn't being apportioned to a specific service then, is it? It's just going to go into the pot. So this works both ways. And the conversation I had with Brendan on Wednesday was around, well, what if we as a region decide we want to put some more money in? What's the mechanism to do that? But also, what if local authorities don't fund it? How does that work? And I'm a little bit confused about that, if I'm honest. But one of the things I think I'd like to see fleshed out before they go to tender is the overall funding envelope going to be decided by the CJC, or by constituent councils, or by Welsh Government? Because if it's being decided by the CJC, then, you know, they've got the power to say, as a region, let's put in a little bit more money. And in my view, the time to have our conversations now, because we talked about this, the worst case scenario network. If we start to look at timetables, morning, evening services between now and spring, and we think, do you know what, this isn't good enough, another 200 grand is going to help. And as a region, we want to put another 200 grand in. Those conversations have to happen, don't they? We know, I appreciate, and you know, we all understand budget issues, don't we? But you've got to prioritise where the benefit could be from spending money in the council. and without knowing what funding can get you what with these services and what the benefits could be, we can't make those decisions. And I think the uncertainty here is that we don't know what the process is, and I don't know whether if you can give me any clarity, I'd appreciate it. But when I raised this in CJC, there was just a bit of, I don't think people were really there either.
So difficult to do clarity, but
Yeah,
like we
yeah.
talk through the process.
Yeah,
but I think it's difficult for officers as well at the moment, because obviously very similar to regional transport plan. You know, we were working on the Welsh Government giving us a set figure within the CJC that we thought we should be working towards in terms of providing the delivery plan, and that changed. So it is difficult. The timing is difficult. And I understand your concerns. It's difficult for us to deal with as officers as well. I think so. I think for clarity, it's TFW that will hold that funding that's already existing in the system. We have checked that the process in terms of the funding that Neath Talbot Council put into local bus at the moment, and that is something that we've got the ability to stop if we wanted to reduce, to increase, and that's something that we could consider. The CJC, the way it's set up now, with the funding for regional transport, and whether TFW would make a play for funding as part of that. You know, the it's different for 26-27, but going forward, it's going to be vested in the CJC in terms of the regional transport funding and the grants mobilisation. Whether they would make a request for additional funding from that, but then that would be within the CJC's power to make a decision on whether or not they wanted to put additional funding in on the region. When we're talking about this at a high level, your point, I think, is pertinent in terms of what does it mean for the residents who want to get to work or they want to get to college, or So it's difficult to talk about it at that level, present, because we're so far away from that detail. I think all I can sort of promise you at the moment is that obviously Brendan and the team are doing as much as they can to make sure we get as good a deal of this as we can within our area. And as things become more clear going forward in terms of the funding envelope and what that looks like, mechanisms, we'll challenge those where we feel we need to, but we can always come back as well to the committee with an update on that as we've got some more clarity.
No, I appreciate that, and I think that this is slightly challenging from a point of view of understanding where the accountability lies as well around this, because it is so muddled. So if we're not happy with what happens in 27, are we at fault for not putting money in? Is the CJC at fault? Like, is TFW like? And I know it's maybe not nice to talk in those terms, but trying to understand the accountability of these different elements of the network planning process is quite challenging, because it is so uncertain. And then that's why I'm trying to kind of unpick, well, what's our role now, and when can we intervene?
Yeah, you're right, Chair. Right, the issue we have, like you mentioned earlier on, we're the first region to go, so we're all learning as we go along. We're Welsh Government and Transport for Wales are working in parallel with this bill going through. The ideal situation would be that the bill would be passed first, and then the process starts. But they are driving this through as it is, and we're holding on to their coattails, I suppose. But with regards to the funding itself, our revenue is unhypothecated. We would not have to supply that funding going forward to support that revenue. But we want to work in partnership with CJC, TFW, Welsh Government, etc. And if we did withdraw funding, that revenue in particular, we would possibly be criticised if the network isn't up to standard, or at least to the standard it is now.
Yeah, and so, just on that point, though, I think there's a fragility in the system there, isn't there, which I'm not sure could stay for very long if the constituent local authorities of the region have got that ability when you've got a regionally planned network, and that feels like something that will eventually have to be vested in the CJC.
Exactly.
And otherwise it won't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree, Chair, because ultimately as well, the duty to secure the local bus network will be with Welsh ministers, where at the moment it's the duty to the local authority. So, basically, if we didn't support financially, then the duty would still falls on the Welsh Government.
Yeah.
But
the assumption has been that
the assumption
funding
being
stays
that
the same and we
continue.
carry on contributing. Yeah.
If you can give you the example, with regards to concession fares, I mentioned earlier on, we contribute 718,000. We receive 365,000 ring fenced concession fares for that. The rest we contribute ourselves. Now, as far as I'm aware, TFW, all the funding, for example, all the grants and everything will go to TFW and they will fund the network. However, it would be up to this council's decision and then whether we continue to support that element of revenue towards concession fares. That would be the way, that would be the position come 2027.
Yeah, and that's what I'm concerned about, actually. Yeah.
I think, just to add, I think that's what this has been designed on at the moment, is that assumption that all the funding that's in the system, retained, and that's what they're designing it on. But by even saying that, it doesn't really mean much because you don't know what that tender process is going to look like. You don't know what those returns are going to be, and we don't know how successful the model is going to be in terms of the franchise model. And is that going to see an uptake in bus use? Is it going to see the opposite? And obviously those fares will be kept by TFW going forward on the new model, whereas at present it's with the operators. So there's a lot of ifs and buts, and unfortunately it's difficult for us as officers to give you any real clarity.
Yeah.
It's a matter of process that we're going through. And all we can give you is our word in terms of saying we're going to work as hard as we can to make sure that we get the best deal we can for these Talbot.
No, okay, and I appreciate that. And I certainly wasn't expecting to get all the answers today. But these are issues I feel like I need to raise because that level of uncertainty bothers me. But there's only so much we can do about that. Okay, members. Are there any other questions or comments from members at the moment? Can't see any. So I just want to take members to the recommendations which are on page 8. And it's quite a long recommendation. I think it goes over to page 9 as well. And I think that James or Brendan picked this up at the start. So this is endorsing the base network in principle. I guess we've discussed the limitations of what that means. In terms of the sort of technicalities of ensuring that the bill can progress. And then there's the delegate authority then in terms of implementing more detailed timetable information, connections, and engagement then ongoing as well, in terms of Transport for Wales. It's the feedback is taken on board. Apologies, members. So are members comfortable with that, given the conversation we've had? I mean, I think I just about am, but I welcome any thoughts.
Well, yeah, I think I'm comfortable with it because certainly from all the workshops and presentations we've had previously, I do feel that the authority's kind of bedrock is that to get the best product and the best deal we can for, and as long as that's entrenched in there and we're all working towards that, I think I do feel comfortable with it. But if there's any if there's any chink in that, then it's going to be
Okay, are you happy to propose the
I'll propose
the recommendation, Bob? Okay, thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Carl Jordan, seconding. Thanks, Carl. Okay, members, if they're not indicated the contrary, then I'll take it that this recommendation is supported.
I can't see any indications to the contrary, Chair. Therefore, this recommendation has been supported. Cabinet.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tom, and thanks both for the thorough discussion there. And the only other comment I'll just make is, and I'm sure this will happen because I do tend to have a little chat with Brendan now and again. But if you can keep me in the loop with those changes that might be happening going forward. I know you mentioned local members and cabinet member, but I'm a little bit of a bus nerd as well, so it's always helpful to know.
Yeah, we come back to
exactly. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I'll move us on now to item 5, which is performance monitoring. So this is on pages 47 to 60, and members will note this was the items that were missing from our papers in the meeting that we had last time. So this fills in those gaps. And just from our pre-briefing, there was a few questions around which items in this paper are in the remit of this committee, because of course bits of engineering and transport now are bought elsewhere. So members will have had an email advising them of that from Tom. I'm going to go to my first indication first, which is from Gareth Rice. I believe you've got a few questions, Gareth. So do you want to kick us off? So, might have lost Gareth.
You're on mute, Councillor Rice, I believe.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, the head of service performance monitoring, yeah?
Yeah, that's where we're at.
Okay, right, the ET10 and ETP MO4, both regarding active travel. Is there a published plan for ward members or the public to see what new routes or improvements or maintenance is planned for their particular area? And do ward members get notified when work is starting or completed within their ward? In particular, I've noticed there's some work gone on in my ward in Britain Ferry, which I was not aware of until I stumbled across it. It'd be nice to have had that information coming forward, because it was asked for by residents, and I have put them requests in, and it'd be nice to have gone back and be able to tell them it is planned, that it's come in or whatever. And it'd be nice just to be kept in the loop, really. So is there a plan, or is it sort of as money comes available, they'll go off a list as and when? Thank you.
James?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Rice. Yeah, just before I go back to Councillor Rice, apologies for the confusion. He's not coming with the other heads of service. We and Louise had a discussion around it. And yeah, I think we're going to the 3 committees, future committees now. So by the time we get the future, which is not far away, yeah, we would have had this sorted.
Yeah, no, that's fine. To be fair, Tom didn't notice it, I didn't notice it, so I think you know, yeah. Well, I noticed it in Invisible Services Scrutiny Committee when I looked at my performance measures and thought, my gosh, how is there so many? Right. So yeah, Councillor Rice, first of all, apologies if officers haven't been in contact. No, and to answer, I suppose, a number of those questions. Yes, there are maps, there are plans, there's the active travel network in terms of what we plan to achieve. There's the active travel master plans within different communities. I think the ones that you're talking about, I think you said was it in Regent Street, they are part of minor improvements, which there's an active travel fund which funds those improvements. Now, on the larger scale active travel works, obviously members will be kept informed, and we've actually had some conversations recently with members and Councillor Jones on the call around that process as well and what that looks like. So we've taken that on board, and members of the team are aware that we need to make sure that we are in obviously correspondence with the local members, and we make sure we update them at any pertinent points of the scheme development. With these smaller ones, you said, I think, you know, requests come in for members. It's then sort of prioritised based on things such as deprivation, population, you know, any key destinations or points. I think what may have happened here, I think what you're alluding to is that whilst there's been early conversations, there's not been any conversations from officers coming back to you to say this is when the works have been undertaken, and just to say that they are happening. So I'll definitely take that back, and I'll make sure I feed that back to officers to make sure that we are obviously in correspondence, you know, whenever there's going to be any, even, and things like drop gives are usually things like you said are asked for by residents. And want to say they're not very contentious, but still it's you know, you do need to know as members, so you know what's going on with the new wards.
Lovely.
Is that big, Gareth?
Yeah, please don't take it that I'm knocking it. I'm very grateful, and it's very welcome that the work is being done. It's just nice so that, and even if you can't go to the ward members, please don't do the work till you speak to us. I want that work done. It's nice to have that dialogue, so I can go back to the residents to say, oh, by the way, what you've asked for now, this is being delivered next week, or, you know, it's whatever, to keep that dialogue open. But thank you for all the work that's there. It's very welcome. So thanks for that.
Can I just check whether Charlotte's got a question on this particular topic? Because I know your next question's slightly different. Was this on active travel working mode, Charlotte?
No, it's on ET27, it's all.
That's all right, fine, I'll mark you down. There we are,
Okay.
Brill. Go ahead, Gareth.
Yep, so thank you. The next one was ET120, all about the pool bike provision. Very interesting topic, and I do fully support this idea in principle and in practice, really. Speaking from personal experience from the fire service, we introduced a similar scheme there, and just some of the obstacles that we had to overcome there. I want to know if we were mirroring within the council, and that was around, let me just my notes here a second. We noticed that it wasn't very well utilised, only by a few people who were keen cyclists anyway, and then only during the fine weather. And this should not detract from the benefits this could provide. However, when offering this to staff, would there be extra training for staff wishing to use these bicycles? We decided in the fire service that we would put people through the cycle proficiency scheme before they were allowed to use these bicycles, because they are now provided by the employers, sorry, which brought along that, you know, some more extra responsibility towards these people. You'd also have to provide them with their own individual PPE, helmets, glasses, high vis, etc., which brings with it an extra cost. Who would be responsible for the maintenance of the bikes? And would there be provision of secure storage for these bikes at the intended, because it does say it's for short trip destinations. So obviously you need it to be, when you take your bike, you just, you know, somewhere we can put it safe and secure. And also, you know, you need to consider if they are going to a place, maybe from office to office for meetings and that, they be cycling, they could get sweaty and hot and sweaty, and, you know, they may need to have provision of shower facilities and changing facilities. So it does open up a massive can of worms. And whilst, you know, in principle, it's a fantastic idea, there are a lot of stumbling blocks. I'm sure you've already considered it, but I thought I'd put my observations from what we've done historically in the past. And another thing that we thought of after we implemented it within the fire service was maybe we should have looked going down the scheme of encouraging more people to apply for the Cycle to Work scheme and having their own bikes and using their own bikes, rather than having the council in this case providing all that extra resource and the responsibility of the maintenance of things, and letting the employees using these cycles use their own bike. And one last thing, which I didn't mention in pre-brief, sorry, was people, you know, you got to be mindful as well that people may, for other reasons, use bicycles to go from place A to place B, and rather than being, if it's a car or whatever, take you 10 minutes, go up an hour, they could take, or I've got a bike today, it could take them an hour and a half, 2 hours to get from plan A to plan B, hour and a half, 2 hours to get back. That's 4 hours out of their day. You know, whereas normal motorized vehicles could take a couple of minutes. That's something to consider, and obviously you've got to get a bit of trust with employees. But a lot of things to pick through there, but I hope we got the gist of what I was getting at. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Gareth. James?
Thanks, Councillor Rice. And you mentioned fine weather there. I'm cursing my road safety manager now, because she's got some fine weather moment. Like Caribbean cruise, when you've got a question like that coming forward. I do my best. I'm not too close to the detail on this, but I do my best. So the first point on training, obviously the road safety team has got its dedicated cycling instructor. Obviously that's then all the training we've done. We do it at different levels. Is done to national standards for cycle training. So we do offer that, and that is something that we would obviously do for the pool bike provision. PPE, and again, I'd have to double check this with Joy, but thinking about it, I think, you know, helmets would actually be personal. You know, I think that would be something that staff would have to purchase themselves, because obviously if there's any bumps on to helmets, then obviously they shouldn't be utilised going forward, and it'd be difficult to manage and police that. But other things like high vis, I know when we do the cycle training, our trainers got the stock of high vis vests, etc., which you can hand out. So the same will go for this. Maintenance of the bikes, I'd have to check with Joy, but I'm assuming whoever we purchase them through, we would have an agreement set up with them then for the maintenance. The storage, I'm just thinking sort of off the top of my head of our buildings. The Keys is well placed for that, and it's got the facilities, but that's something we'd have to consider. And if there's things we needed to install, we'd have to consider that as well. And the same, I suppose, goes for the provision of shower facilities in terms of welfare. You know, this isn't for long journeys, which I suppose we'll touch upon on the last point. You know, it's for these shorter journeys, but I do take your point. Most of our facilities are set up, but not all of them. I think that would have to be something we consider, because obviously it's easy to put like the storage in, not so easy to go and put shower facilities in because of the costs associated with it. But we can definitely look at that. Encouraging people for the cycle to work scheme, it's done. You know, it's done regular through things like the sway and in the loop. So that's already done, and I can speak to officers as well to make sure that we are pushing that out to the road safety team. The timings and the longer journeys, and I understand the point you were making. I think it's the same as hybrid working is. For example, it would be down to the manager to make a decision. Actually, yeah, that's acceptable, or no, that is not acceptable. You can't travel from one side of the authority to the other authority on a bike, even if you'd like to on a nice sunny day, to get to a meeting and back, because it's just taking up too much officer time. So that certainly wouldn't be anything that would be allowed, and we'd have a framework in place for that as well.
Is that okay, Gareth?
Yeah, that's great. I just thought I'd add my observations to when I read through it. I thought, oh, we've been on this road previously, so I thought I'd offer observations. And rightly, as I expected, you've already thought of them anyway. So yeah, thank you, chap.
Okay, I've got a few just to add on that particular item as well, so I might as well jump in now. I mean, we did have a bit of a discussion in this on pre-brief actually, and you know, we had pool bikes before, and some of the lockers were still hanging around at the Keys and in this building. It's, I mean, when I was there a few years ago, and I'm certainly not against the principle, but I think Gareth's talked about all the considerations we've got to make, and I think they're all fair observations. But my concern would be around the focus here on the Healthy Travel Charter of what problems we need to fix or what interventions we need to make to have the most impact. So, you know, there's been some discussion around people bringing their own bikes to work, and one thing I repeatedly talk about is the cycle storage at our buildings. You know, if you buy a bike through the cycle to work scheme, that bike could be worth £1,000, £2,000, you know, and we've got some Sheffield stands outside Neath Civic Centre that are not, you know, particularly secure. You know, in this building, there's very limited cycle parking, and the situation in the Keys is also not fantastic. When I went there previously, there's a sign up saying, you know, bikes were stolen from this shelter, use a good lock. So there's interventions we could make. All of our buildings, we've already got access cards. It's not particularly difficult to put bike storage behind the secure door. And I think interventions like that actually have a big impact on whether people will cycle to work. It's certainly, me as a member who cycles to council buildings, I worry in Neath. I worry less in this building because there's a reasonably good spot to put my bike, though it's currently not usable because of the building work. And last time I put my bike in the Keys, I looked at the sign saying bikes get stolen, and I cycle around on a bike that's not worth a lot of money because I'm worried about it being stolen. If I had a £2,000 bike, I probably wouldn't leave it. And I've made these points before, but it's just worth just picking that up, because I'm not against this intervention, but I think we want to make sure all those other things are in place. And if we are going to survey staff, which I think it does mention, we're going to do a consultation exercise. Yeah. I think we should make sure that's wide enough to unpick what barriers people are facing. Are the showers working? I know they're okay in the quays. Some of the ones in this building have been decommissioned. It's little things like that which actually we could pick up. So I'll leave that point there. I don't know if I've got anything to say to that, James,
no,
but
I think it's a pertinent point, especially if we want this to work and be used. I think what I'll do is when Joy returns, I ask Joy and the team, can they work closely with Jenkins and then sending Brennan's department to do a little bit of a review of that. And I think there's not major work, but just to see what the facilities are like. Are they working in some locations, especially with works going on as well? You know, what's the temporary facilities looking like? And I think it's a pertinent point that we include that as part of the sort of staff engagement that we do. Yeah.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Okay. Did any other members have questions? I know, Councillor Goldsworthy, I put something in the chat. I don't know if you picked it up, but you're right. You had a question on has gone to the Street Scene Scrutiny Committee, so it doesn't fall under this committee's remit any longer. I'm afraid. We did have a bit of a chat in pre-brief about it in terms of 20 mile an hour. Okay, yeah. So I'll just pick up one or two other brief things. So in terms of the measures around local bus operators and engagement with them, I can't remember the exact item, but I think you know what I'm referring to, Brendan. Yeah. So I know we've had some discussions before around, you know, through whether that was home to school transport, whether that's through all the issues that have happened through the bus network grants post-COVID, around engaging with those bus operators can be challenging. And I just wondered if you could maybe give a flavour as to where that relationship is at the moment, and particularly with the smaller operators, because I mean, first is one thing, but we've got quite a few SMEs operating service buses and contracts, and I just wondered if you had a...
Yeah, I think I introduced this PI into this performance management, because as going back to the last agenda item, then you can see that most of our work within local bus is dealing with grant funding and dealing with contractors. So it was difficult for me to put a PI together, because I was wondering whether we could put a satisfaction survey out for passengers. But then their satisfaction survey would be relevant then to possibly the operation of the service by the operator. So that's why I've introduced the PI, along with James, introduced this PI to measure our performance as a section and the operator's perception of our performance. So we don't specifically ask them on franchising, if I'm honest. But that's something we need to look at in the future, but I'm sure we could possibly do that. And it's important that we have a decent working relationship with our operators, and I believe we're at that stage in Neath Talbot, although it was on the education transport side last year, it was knocked a little bit, but we're working back through that. We've got a lot of SMEs working on local bus and home to school transport. They've responded to my performance questions or satisfaction questions in the past, and they've been quite positive. So yeah, does that answer your question, Chair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
If it was difficult to put a performance satisfaction survey in, other than asking our operators, asking passengers, they would only respond the performance of the operators, operating the network.
And I get that. I just particularly because of the context, I think, when those operators are maybe feeling a bit uncertain or a bit tense, it can constrain those relationships in other areas as well, can't it? So,
right, yeah.
Do you have anything to add there, James?
Yeah, I think obviously, and rightly so as well, there's obviously a push for us to be able to consider corporately how we're doing well, how we know we're doing well, how do we measure ourselves, how do we measure performance. And obviously I understand, before I came to post, obviously Brendan and working with Dave on this, and this was put into the business plan. It makes sense. It's a difficult one to do within the personal transport, but I think I'll be going record today just to say, look, my thanks to Brendan and the team, because since me coming across with engineering transport, his passenger transport 50 years has been fantastic, and it's been a total learning curve for myself, but it's been one that's been made easy by Brendan and Paul and the rest of the team. So
And that's really good to know. And I think, you know, committee members who've had engagement with Brendan and the team will probably agree with that. I know I certainly do, but it's always good to hear that from the head of service as well. There's one last question from me, which was just in relation to the statutory inspections. So there was a few around so 0, 7, 8 and 9. So one was around bridges and highway structures, which are shown as ahead of target. So that's positive. And then we've got the call tips one again, that's on target, again, positive. The only one that looks slightly off is in relation to reservoirs and dams owned by the authority. We got lots of those. Because I'm aware of the Margam, but I wasn't really aware of the others. But is there, in terms of that one being behind, is there an update on that? Or
yeah, I can give you an update.
Yeah.
So we've got more reservoirs, but the statutory ones in terms of based on size,
Yeah.
or country parks with Margam or not.
Okay, fair.
So the team are working closely with Chris Saunders' team, with Darren Evans and the team as well, because obviously it's a difficult one. Obviously, the budget sits with the country parks. Before the North moved, that sat with me, and that was something I had to sort of address when I was in neighbourhood.
Yeah.
For the North, but yeah, it's not one I'm concerned about. It's one that we can address pretty quickly, and it's already work has been done to do that. So I suppose we couldn't say that yes, it's 100% on target. But it's one that will be obviously before the year end, and we're going to meet the dates that we need to meet. And I think it's just you touched briefly as well on the core tips. Yep, on target. But there's funding being made available with Welsh Government at the moment, being put into tip safety. So we at present we're working on a proposal within with Hassan and Paul Anson's team to put a team together through that funding that's being made available. We've got the most in Wales within Neath for Talbot. I think Romney and Taff I've got a few more than us, which are sort of more risky. But we've got the biggest number, so we're putting a proposal together at present to make sure we can manage and maintain them going forward as best possible.
Okay, that's good. That's good news. Thank you for that. Okay, I can't see any other indications from members. So I will just, this is obviously a performance monitoring, so it's just for noting. We'll note that report. And it just takes us on to agenda item 6, which is the forward work programme. So I'll hand over to Tom just to remark if there's any changes to the forward work programme.
Thank you, Chair. There's just one change to note. The Four Winds report, which we spoke about previously at the committee, has now been added to the forward work programme. So that is going to, I believe,
12th of December. So
thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, 12th of December. And as the Chair sort of mentioned earlier, obviously we found that anomaly with the way that reporting goes for home to school transport. So I've had some discussions with Craig and with Louise. So that should be reported in future to education. If members do have any questions in the meantime that they wish to ask, if you wanted to send them to me, I can pass those on in the interim. But it's quite a convoluted issue, that one. So it's just sort of falling between the two committees at the moment, but that will be resolved going forward.
Yeah, and I think just on that point, I mean, it's always worth remembering that members can request to attend the Education Scrutiny Committee if they're not members of that committee as well. So you could always email Becca and ask to attend if you did want to scrutinise any items for that committee. So it's just a reminder. And the other reminder would just be for members, if they do have any items they want to put on the agenda for scrutiny, just to get in touch with me anytime, and we can have a chat about that. So other than that, I've got no urgent items today, so that ends business today. So thank you everyone, and yeah, we'll close the business to a close.
Thank you.